Thank you so much for having me speak here today. Hello, everyone. As it's been mentioned a couple times, my name is Nick Ayer. I'm a transportation planning manager with the Dixie Metropolitan Planning Organization. If you're not familiar with what our agency does, we provide planning and funding assistance to the urbanized area within Washington County and provide any regional planning assistance with our transportation roadways and our roadway networks. As Judith mentioned earlier, our study I'll be talking about today was our active transportation accessibility study. It was an effort to kind of analyze some more alternative transportation methods within our urbanized area and seeing how it might measure up with our prioritization process and what is to come down the road with planning for active transportation facilities and any type of alternative transportation that we want to kind of address down the line. As part of what we do is analyzing all modes of transportation. I work on a few different things with our travel demand modeling efforts, and this is part of what we kind of want to integrate down the line. If anyone's unfamiliar with active transportation, really what that is just walking, biking, using any type of bus routes that are in your local vicinity to be able to get to where you need to go. So a little bit about the project overview. This was a purely academic study just to kind of identify some key measures that were integrated into the toolkit that we provided to see what parts of the urbanized area in Washington County had the most accessible areas when it came to active transportation. We primarily focused on just pedestrian and cycling abilities, so that kind of created a little bit of limitations in what we were able to do, but because of the limited resources that we are provided at the MPO, that's kind of what we wanted to identify. There are some other aspects that I'll get into that we want to also integrate in the future, but that's kind of what we were trying to do. Some recent initiatives through the state of Utah are going through to kind of identify some more ways to be healthier communities, to provide all sorts of connectivity issues, or to address some connectivity issues that may be prevalent in any area. So that's kind of where we wanted to address before those initiatives really got to kickstart. This really just provided a toolkit for prioritizing future active transportation projects, and it's not necessarily trying to tell communities what exactly it is they should be doing, but it is providing an avenue to kind of say what it is they can do to increase accessibility in the future if they so chose.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Is it okay if people ask questions in between and they don't understand terminology or something like
Absolutely,
that?
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for asking. Yeah, if you have any questions throughout this whole process, this will be kind of technical, so I understand that anything kind of does sound a little like jargon to you. Just let me know and I can definitely answer those questions for you. So like I said, some of our goals and objectives were promoting the expansion of multimodal transportation, measuring the existing facility, bike and pedestrian facilities as they are within the urbanized area. So this didn't necessarily take into account the planned infrastructure that is going to come or is going to happen within the near future. This is just analyzing what it is on the ground now and how it affects future planning growth. Increasing quality of life standards to be able to have those safe and easily accessible areas for staying off the roadways if you are an avid cyclist or are trying to just get some steps in. These are kind of the things that we wanted to identify in this study. Some of the projects that are previously mentioned or referenced as a support system to kind of kickstart this study was the measuring multimodal network connectivity along the Wasatch Front. This was something that was done back in between 2017 and 2019 that really just allowed us to kind of go full force. It was done by the United States Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, in tandem with Wasatch Front Regional Council and Maricopa Association of Governments and UDOT, so Utah Department of Transportation. Some other studies that we kind of referenced were the Utah Collaborative Active Transportation Study, as well as Utah Active Transportation Study through Bike Utah. Some initial takeaways that we knew right off the bat was that the existing data through using geographic information systems data may have been limited. A lot of the areas in southern Utah don't have a vast amount of data availability as they do up in like the Salt Lake and Provo areas. They have wide staff available to kind of create and maintain these data sets and understand if they have existing needs right away. That's not necessarily the case down here. We have some limiting factors in that regard, whether it's because of just data quality or data maintenance through staffing or individual agencies' abilities, especially in our rural areas, or more rural areas, I should say. Being able to visually see where the gaps may be. So we have an incredible separated trail network in southern Utah. It's one of the many things that bring people down here for recreation, as well as even commuting. Some of the things that we've been analyzing is whether or not people are actually using those trails just for fun, or if they're actually using them to get to work. A lot of people, when I first started, said that they're just for fun, they're just using them for recreation, to get out, get healthy, that kind of thing. But as we continue to grow and as transportation continues to grow with it, congestion definitely becomes an issue with people driving on the roadways and kind of being in that kind of nightmare of how am I going to get to work if I'm not going to get there in the time frame that I want. So when certain projects come up that allow individuals to bike somewhere in a shorter time frame than it would be to actually drive there, those are projects we kind of want to keep an eye out for and see if it's actually beneficial for our infrastructure. Further research needs to be identified in the future, and so one of our plans for this toolkit is to continuously update it along with our long-range plan that gets updated every 4 years. So some of the key metrics that was identified in the original FHWA guidebook that I previously mentioned are as follows. Network complete, and I'll get into all of these individually as I go through the presentation. Network completeness, really just identifying percent of street miles designated with bike facilities. Network density, which is identifying some weighted intersection capabilities and whether or not it's actually possible through connectivity to get somewhere in a timely fashion. Route directness, which we were not able to include in this study just because of limitations, like I said before, and time constraints. Access to destinations, which identifies things that people go to on a regular basis, which is grocery stores, schools, that kind of thing. And then network quality, which is that stress level that will kind of identify how easy is it to bike on certain sections of the road. There are plenty of trails, if you're an avid cyclist or just know in general, there are plenty of trails that are kind of difficult for people of certain age groups to kind of go through. My favorite one to identify is Hellhole Trail in Washington City, which has a 2% grade. Yeah.
Isn't it 12%?
12%, I'm so sorry, 12%. Yeah, 2 in my head. 12% grade, so people of a certain age demographic or with certain abilities or any kind of like, might not be able to get up that trail as easily if they weren't using something like an e-bike or anything to assist them in. So percent of street miles with designated bike facilities. This is what we kind of use to identify where the most facilities are located. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like here. So everything in that darker shade of blue are areas where there are more segments of bike facilities than there are regular roadway facilities, as well as just a larger cluster in general. So this is kind of analyzing where those densest areas are for that percentage of miles.
Question?
Yeah.
Can we go back?
Sorry, yeah.
I have a question too. When you say facilities,
Sorry.
can you just help me understand, maybe define what that means?
Bike lanes, trails, or sidewalks, that kind of thing. That's
Okay,
what I'm.
so
That's what
sidewalks are included in facilities?
in a small way, if the data was available. It kind of was used not necessarily as a key metric, but definitely as an additional metric because we had the data. So that was one of the other limiting factors that we had with the data itself.
Okay, and
There
then
was
the other
another
question?
question.
Yes.
Was it yours as well?
Okay. Perfect. Thank you for asking. So like I said, weighted intersection density. So when it comes to connectivity, one of the things that gets identified is how people are crossing streets, or if there are enough cross sections on the roadway network to get people to and from places. So when you have major sections of road, like let's just use Telegraph, if anyone's familiar with that section of road where it's long stretch connecting you to all the way from Hurricane all the way into St. George in southern Washington County. That's great to have that one section of roadway that's connecting you to all of these places, but how many roadways are connecting into that road to get you to other spider webbing out into other parts of the network? In order to identify something as a true intersection, we only identified 3-ways and 4-way intersections. One of the other things that came up that was a limitation might be pedestrian crosswalks. We weren't able to get that data in time. There are now some things that we are able to identify with that, just basically by going out and actually surveying the areas and seeing if there's any safe routes to school and that kind of thing. But I digress. So for weighted intersection densities, that was able to identify where the biggest congregation or cluster of intersections would be. That way, because a higher number of intersections in an area determines how well connected the network in that area is. Multimodal travel sheds. What this is, and this is literally, you can see the list here of all the things that were considered as a multimodal travel shed. These were identified in the original study from FHWA as things people are using or getting to and from on a regular basis. So identifying bus stops for alternative transportation, and then identifying how close those areas are to other local networks or other travel sheds. So, and trying to identify school locations, community centers, libraries, medical facilities, parks, trailheads, all those type of things are what we kind of wanted to identify as most, most people want to actually get to. So we identified that by taking individual points and creating a buffer around those areas snapped to our transportation network at a quarter mile, half mile, and a 1 mile radius. Why those distances were decided? Because through certain studies that have been done in the past, identified that a mile is usually the longest someone is willing to, the average person is willing to actually walk or cycle to get to the grocery store or to school if they had to, essentially. So what that looks like when it's all together, everything in red is usually the highest density of those individual travel sheds. And then as it's kind of spreads out is where we see the areas that might be least likely to have any type of accessibility in that area. So bike level traffic stress. So this is just a cluster of things that we use to kind of identify how easy it might seem to ride the active transportation network as it is. So if it's a bike facility along any type of that's on street, So your regular bike lanes or anything that might be identified as a paved or marked or signed shared bike way, we identified that on the roadway and then kind of try to see if speed limits affected it, because the higher the speed limit is on a roadway, the least likely the average person is willing to actually ride their bike or walk along that segment of road. Bike facility presence. So if there wasn't any bike facility or sidewalk data available, or if it just wasn't there, like in a safe presence, then we gave it a lower score. Travel signal locations, I'm sorry, that's good, getting ahead of myself. Traffic signal locations, so at like we looked at in the weighted intersection densities, if an intersection had a traffic light or something, or pedestrian crossing light that gave that extra bit of safety when someone's trying to cross the roadway, we identified that as a key characteristic that people want to kind of be at more. That way they have a protective measure when they're crossing the street. AADT traffic volumes, which is annual average daily traffic. This is what comes out of our travel demand model. This calculates the capacity on certain roadways and how much traffic there actually is. So say on busier roadways, on major arterials, you'll have that high capacity of vehicles on the road. So the higher the capacity is with that, the least likely people are the average person is going to be walking or biking that network, just for that added feel of safety. So slope and elevation data was actually the most important one. That's what this image will be seeing. This identifies, because our topography is such a unique characteristic of our area, and one of the biggest reasons that people actually love being out here, it may not have that accessibility for, like I mentioned earlier with Hellhole Trail, trailways that are on those steep slopes. While they are interesting and they are cool, it might not be as easy to use for anyone who may not be an avid cyclist or not using an e-bike or that kind of thing. So I can kind of zoom in a little here. This is, I want to ask, does anyone know where this is? Throw out this little area right here.
On the airport?
Yeah, that's Tech Ridge. So up there's one or two trail facilities, paved trail facilities on there that people like to go up, or if you've done the stair challenge over there, people know that getting up on foot to Tech Ridge is very difficult. So the steeper elevation is for that a trail is on, the lower the score it got, just based on average person's ability. So other metrics that we included, we had tree canopy coverage. We actually developed this in a way to kind of go along the actual bikeway network. So if it had a large cluster of trees on certain sections of the road, it got a higher score, just because if people are walking or biking along a network, they want to take a break, they would love to do it under some shade, especially in the summer months.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah.
I think that's so amazing that you did that. I remember hearing that for the first time, and I really perked up, and it really, it's so important, and you were able to kind of bring that across, and you're showing that, and it also illustrates why sustainable transportation, biking, walking leads to thriving neighborhoods, because you have to think about those contextual factors. And it's so beneficial from so many others.
And a lot of our cities that are incorporated in MPO, they thought that was a great data set that we provided, just because and I know the intern that we hired to actually create that data set was very pleased with the result, because he sat in front of a Google Earth screen for weeks just getting an initial count of how many trees there are, and then we went out into the field and actually made sure that those trees were there, or we had to actually go into the data set and kind of tweak it a little bit so that it actually was as accurate as possible for the analysis that we were doing. The next thing that we used was another thing that we provide in our travel demand model, which is population and employment densities through our TAS zones, which are traffic analysis zones. So this is actually a huge lift when we're developing our travel demand model. We actually get census data that provides, or not census data as well as county assessor data that gives us an accurate number of how many people are in certain zones. They're kind of more like census zones that you might be able to see. And it gives us an idea of what percent of the population are where within the county. So that was taken into consideration, so we knew where the most people lived, where the most people worked, and that kind of characteristic. Land use mix, we used parcel data to kind of identify where the most mixed use areas are compared to where the single family residents were, or areas with vacant parcel lots that kind of got pushed to the side because we weren't taking that into consideration. Underserved areas, that was actually a metric that was developed by Federal Highways that identified areas or population percentages that might not have the easiest accessibility for transportation. So it took into account income, single to no vehicle households, as well as a few other aspects that kind of identified where are areas that kind of are underserved to better meet the needs that are not being met in those areas. So so the more rural areas within the county kind of get identified more in that kind of metric, but there are still certain census groups that get identified within the urbanized area as well. So we wanted to make sure those being put into account. And then just some additional census data, so percent of dependent age groups. So that's that's a typo. That's that should be under 16 and over 65. Percentage of under poverty level. So if you're at a lower income, you're more likely to have no vehicle in the household to get you to places, get to work, get your kids to school, that kind of thing. So we want to be able to identify those major areas, and then again, percent no vehicle. So, to identify those high percentage areas.
Before you go on.
Yes,
I
sorry.
have another question.
Yeah.
So on your land use mix, and I have actually written this down before you got here, but I just want to clarify. I'm trying.
I'll repeat your question.
Yeah. I put down, did you use zoning as a comparative measure in the land use mix in the parcel data? Did you guys actually identify the zoning in those areas as well?
Great question. So if you didn't hear a question, did we analyze zoning as part of the land use metric? Unfortunately, that was one of the data limitations that we ran into. A lot of local areas will literally just put their zoning maps just on a static PDF map, and we were going along with GIS data that we actually had to physically manipulate and put into the network, so we just didn't have time to create that data set from scratch. So it's one of the things that we want to include in the future if it's going to be developed by those areas that might not have the resources to actually create it. And zoning is constantly changing or being reassessed in planning commissions. So that was one of the other considerations we had to take into account. But yeah, thank you for asking that. So going forward, some of the things that we want to be able to incorporate into this, because we want to continue to improve upon the data set and improve upon the metrics that we used. So one of the biggest things that I actually was super excited to get my hands on was St. George City actually used MPO funds to provide trail counters within St. George. I think at the time that we funded them, they purchased somewhere between 12 to 14 trail counters. Majority of them were stationary. They were like dug into the ground, and they are permanent there. They kind of stay there. There's a couple of them that are mobile, so you can take them up and you can put them in different spots to get some individual metrics. We wanted to be able to include this now, but because they actually installed them so early on, we didn't have an entire data set to actually work with. But I do want to mention that within the first year that after those 12 to 14 counters were put in on our paved separated trails within the areas that they were installed, counted 1.2 million pedestrian and cyclists within the first year. And that's total. That's they can break them down a little better at the city to see where those spots are. But you can kind of see that map right there is kind of telling you, I think that's Confluence Park right there is where they see the most traffic of people walking or riding their bikes. So that was actually a huge thing that we wanted to get our hands on to kind of use as a metric, but like I said, we just didn't have the time and availability to actually include that. So our route directness, that was one of the key metrics from the Federal Highway study that we couldn't use. Essentially what this is showing you is how fast it would be or how long it would take for you to drive to a certain location as it would to bike to that exact same location. So that's just something that we couldn't do based on data metric or data analysis like standards. We couldn't actually do that metric, so that's something that we want to take into the future. We want to incorporate the actual regionally significant planned trails. When I say regionally significant, that's mainly just the paved, separated trails in the individual cities. I could get into how we actually identify those. That's through our MPO long-range planning process. So that's kind of a whole nother conversation to kind of go through. But those are the kind of projects that we want to help uplift and identify as what is a good project to bring forth down the line. And it's also this planned network is also being used. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Utah Trail Network Initiative through the Utah Department of Transportation to create a statewide trail network that UDOT helps build, fund, maintain, and then so that you can easily ride your bike all throughout the state if you so chose. It's one of the really cool things that's coming up that has been happening. They should be done by the end of the year with their final plan. The last thing that we kind of wanted to use this for, and that was kind of helping us springboard into, was the most recent Senate Bill 195, for transportation amendments in the Utah State Legislature. Essentially what this is doing is it is requiring cities and metropolitan planning organizations to identify transportation connectivity implementation or implements to provide, sorry, I'm trying to read this, I don't have my glasses on, to provide a report to the Planning Commission for increasing connectivity problems in certain areas. So we're already in the process of updating that one of those metrics right now and identifying some connectivity issues in the state or in our region for state use. So it's really perfect timing that we actually did this study when we did, because we were able to actually use the information we got to expand upon and use it for this endeavor to help with connectivity issues. And then as an added bonus, I'm not sure if this will pop up on the projection, but you can go to the Dixie MPO website and actually go through this study, and then I'll hopefully be able to show you what our network looks like. Here we go.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When you talk about regional, are you strictly referring to Washington County?
No, yes and no. So when I say regional or regionally significant, I'm talking about what's being identified within the MPO's planning process. So those are usually large capital projects or projects that are need a little extra assistance through state or federal funding and that kind of.
So that could fall outside of Washington County.
It does fall outside.
And overlap with like other counties, right?
Yeah. So.
Just in case anyone else had that question too.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So those regional projects are identified through the Utah Unified plan, which is a statewide effort through the more rural areas and the urbanized MPO areas to identify large capital projects. So this is so with everything that I mentioned, all the metrics that we included, and all aggregated into one seemingly easy map to kind of identify where the most accessible areas for active transportation are within the urbanized boundary. The boundary has kind of changed a little bit since then, but because of where we're at now, we'll update that in the future. But essentially, what you're seeing is pretty much what you would expect in the more centralized areas within the cities is where you would see that higher amount of accessibility, just because that's usually how cities operate. Everything gets kind of built and planned out from an inside-out perspective. So one of the key things that we identified was not the fact that some of the areas are more accessible than others, but because of the characteristics of certain or accessibility metrics that are in a given area, they might pop up more than another. So it's not necessarily because it's more accessible, it's because of the other characteristics. So for example, like down in Sun River, it may not have the most facilities for walking or biking, but there is a higher percentage of people of dependent age groups in that area. That's one of the reasons why it pops up so much.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so there aren't a whole lot of bike lanes or those facilities over there, a high percentage of those facilities over there, but because there's low speeds, low stress, higher population over 65, or now that they have a grocery store out there in a certain distance, they're able to get to where they need to in a slower or a more accessible way. So, and people who live in Sun River will tell you all the time, I love taking my golf cart out there, so there's less cars on the road. So that's an even added measure for safety. Yeah. Oh, safety. That was one of the things that I did not mention on here. So through the MPO, we actually did a safety study recently that identified historically high areas for roadway fatal and serious injury crashes that also got put onto this analysis. And that literally took the entire roadway network within the county and identified where those historically dangerous areas are, and then if the roadway had a higher number of historic crashes, it gave it a lower score. So that's also one of the things that we took into consideration.
When you say crashes, are we talking about vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to pedestrian or?
Every death or serious injury that happened on the roadway network was included. So yes, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian. Vehicle to pedestrian actually got a higher identification through that process because it's more likely that someone dies from getting hit, their body getting hit from a car than two people would be in a car. Sorry, it's a little morbid, but it's definitely one of the key things that we wanted to identify. So that was also added onto this analysis as well. But essentially, that's what we used to kind of create this entire network. And we, like I said, want to continue to improve upon it in the future. And that's what will happen as we go. But that's pretty much everything that I wanted to go over. I'm sure everyone's got some questions, so I'll be happy to answer those now. Yes?
So now you have all this information, a lot of good information. What's the next step that you take?
The next step that we take is being able to use it and identifying some actual priorities on the roadway network. So we're actually using this actively now to see what bike or trail facilities need to be put on the higher priority list. So what that means is when we get funding through the MPO to put certain trails into that are not yet created, or some trail gaps that have not been identified. We need to be able to connect those gaps on the network so that people can actually get to where they want to go in a safer, more effective way. I think she had her hand up first.
I think it was last month, Danielle Larkin was here and she was talking about public transportation, and you mentioned that includes active transportation. Was
Yes.
that considered? Okay. And she did mention that more recent study has not been done, yet we have grown quite substantially. So when do you think that we will be able to have revealing or weighty study on the public transportation system? Because the requirements are a little different than, you would say, bike and.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so 5 County Association of Governments does actually have a pretty in-depth transit study. Not necessarily talking about what the future may come for transit, but it does talk about what the individual people who took surveys want to see out of their transit network, and what would make them ride transit more often. There is a study out there for that. I don't have access to it at this moment. Yeah, I think Scott Buys through 5 County Association of Governments loves talking about that study that came out. It has a ton of great information. Some people took the survey and said, I would be willing to take transit more often if there was a bus stop closer to my house. I know that's one of the biggest things right now for a lot of people. And some people said, I'll take transit more often if there were shorter headways in order to get places, because I think right now we have 7 or 8 bus routes and only 1 bus per route. So more people want to be able to get where they're going. So that literally says on one route, I can get to and from the first trip in 10 minutes, but that means on the way back it's gonna take me 30 to 40 minutes to get back.
I'm sorry. One more comment to that. To that point, I was wondering, I see a lot of the buses go through, and of course, I don't ride them very often because I work out by the airport. I live downtown, but there's nothing by the airport.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that if you could combine the schedule with the planes arriving and a bus that actually serves that and bring people to town, and then maybe have a main trunk and then terminals that kind of work around the neighborhood. Smaller buses maybe.
Mm-hmm.
More people working, but maybe more effective.
Absolutely, yeah. If it was a matter of just being able to add more buses to the routes, I think that's one way to kind of go about addressing it. Or if it was a way of actually adding more routes so people can actually get everywhere. There was a conversation not that long ago about getting, since the installation of the Springdale bus line, getting all the way out into Iron County or into Kane County with a bus system, so that they can come into more urbanized areas for their shopping, that kind of thing, or just general recreation. So those conversations are happening.
Do we need to write letters? Well,
Yeah, right.
Actually,
So
I was going to speak to that same thing.
Yeah.
Because that was on my list. This goes well. It segues just nicely into strong counts, and I had put down, what suggestions do you have if people want to make suggestions like this? Who do they contact, and what do you need in order to make that suggestion real? Like tangible. My 3 things are actionable, tangible, and what can I do on the daily? And an email would be useful, but what information should be in that email?
Personally, I would definitely say that, yeah, I would definitely say, trying to contact members of city council and telling them what your frustrations are with the transit network as it is. That's kind of the first step into actually getting out there and seeing, or making sure that they know what it is that you want out of your transportation needs. That kind of thing, it really just sounds super simple when you put it that way, but if you and your neighbors and everyone else that you know is having the same frustrations, being able to contact them, coming to the MPO meetings that we have, we have our advisory and our executive committees that we have both on a monthly basis, and we have open to the public, and they can come in and hear what projects are coming into fruition and what projects are in the pipeline, and they literally take into account like what's more efficient to prioritize in those projects that come in through the regionally significant projects that we talk about. Those get talked about what is more feasible to happen now rather than 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Do you get appointed to those committees?
Sorry?
Do you get appointed to those committees, or how's that?
Those committees are made up of local city public works offices, mainly engineers, and then the executive committee is of the local elected officials.
Can
Yeah.
I jump in? So I go when I can to those meetings, and anybody interested, we can talk about it later. Come with me. We can go sit there together. That's great. And also, you mentioned Scott Boyce, is that?
Buys.
Buys,
Yeah.
yes.
BUYS.
With Five County,
Yeah.
he's the mobility manager, and I know that Susan Crook, our co-lead, she talked to him, and we were talking about maybe inviting him in the fall, seeing if he would come, because I think it's a little bit outside of your scope and
Yeah.
what you're doing, right? But there's a lot happening in transit right now that I
Yeah.
think would be really cool for us to hear more about. Yeah.
I think he would be a great resource to have on here. He would definitely love to talk about that transit study that was done.
Great.
And I'd like to piggyback off of that, sorry, Sarah, that the transit system is run by the city and it's not run by the county.
Right.
And so there's a lot of disconnect in who can do what when it comes to that, which is why I wanted to qualify.
Yes.
When you say city council, we need to send that to the
St. George City Council, yes. Thank you for, yeah.
Because they're the ones who are in charge of the bus system. It would be ideal to have like a UDOT be involved with that, it would seem. So if we wanted to include letters to UDOT to say, why can't we see that from UDOT sponsorship, who would that be? And is that through the county?
So that's actually a really hard question to say.
Sorry,
It's not because there's no one to talk about it with. It's mainly because in our region specifically, there has been a lot of skepticism about UDOT coming in and promoting certain aspects of transportation themselves. I know. I don't name names, but I know of some UDOT staff members who have had conversations about increasing transit and increasing transit accessibility, not just in this county, but in 5 counties as a whole. And it got met with a little bit of trying to think of a nice word for it. Yeah, pushback. I guess pushback. Yeah, to put it nicely. Just because they really wanted local champions to kind of come out and say like we want to include more regional transit in the area. One of the most influential people I know who love to talk about it is Mayor Bruno of Springdale. She was a huge factor in getting the Springdale line up and running and making sure that things were getting put into place at the right time, so that anyone who didn't want to drive all the way from St. George to Springdale to go to Zion were able to do that. So she's a great resource to kind of talk through that stuff.
And she is who again?
Mayor
Oh, the
Bruno.
mayor.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mayor Bruno.
sorry.
Yeah, Springdale.
Yeah. Just in case anyone else. And
Yeah.
Sarah. Or
Yeah.
I think everybody.
I think my hand is up a while, and I'm gonna shift gears, so if your question's tied into mass transit, you might want to go before. 15 years ago, I watched some people present on a study they were involved with, and it had to do with crime. And they call it walkable communities, which sounds exactly what you're talking about. Can you get to where the services that you need without a car, basically? It was intriguing to me. Lower vandalism, lower crime, including lower substance abuse in walkable communities. And I would be really interested to see an overlay of the work that you've done with crime rate rates.
Yeah.
It just seems like a really nice way to get buy-in from, you know, the business community, politicians or whatever. So I don't know if you've done anything like that or.
Yeah, actually, since you asked it, I did a study very, very close to this when I was in grad school, and we actually did do that. We did it for the city of Tempe, Arizona, and we actually did incorporate crime rates and individual crime reporting for vandalism, assault, yeah, those type of things, yeah, breaking and entering, those type of reports. We took those and we put them in as one of the metrics for a similar study there.
Did it play out?
It played out really well, yeah. Like it identified some areas that really needed to be addressed, mainly like kind of how this popped up in like more centralized urban areas, like downtowns, that kind of thing. That's where it kind of popped up. But it was definitely a really interesting aspect to that study that we did.
Yeah. Sorry, 2 questions. The first one's easy. If we have a suggestion about an area where additional bicycle infrastructure is really needed, is that also outreach to a city council or is that a different entity?
If it's if it depends on who it's owned by, I would say. If it is owned by a local agency, then yes. If it's maintained by City of St. George per se, that's something. Yeah, then definitely reach out to them. If it's privately owned, got to go through whoever owns that property, that kind of thing. But yeah, that's a great question.
Can I ask you another question? Could you zoom in if you have the ability on like River Road?
Yes. Which part? Which section?
All the shopping stuff. So like Target, Michael's. This is my question. It's based on it'll show my naivety because I don't know how change happens in this sphere. But like when I think about River Road, that's a place where in a single day I could shop, I could get a meal, I could visit my doctor. There's so many things I could do, but I would never bike there because it's scary even driving there. And so
you're talking on the roadway itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be a corridor where I could do so many things in a single day, and I love the idea of biking to do it, but it seems so unsafe. So how does the change happen? I know it's a big question, but it's literally I don't know.
That's a great question. There are some segments on or near River Road that kind of provide more of a separated transportation option. I know it's not entirely utilized to my knowledge, but if you're trying to get around that area on River Road, if you're trying to advocate for more safe infrastructure in the future, that's definitely another thing that should be taken into consideration when improvements are already being made. So improvements are always being made along the roadways year after year after year. And when major ones come in, like say on Bluff Street, when Bluff Street is going to be improved in the near future, they're going to put a separated trail along that ditch. At least that's the plan at this point. So once they do that, there'll be a safer, separated system for cyclists and pedestrians to be on. So things like that do come into the pipeline, and they do get talked about in a very serious way. And when those projects happen, they'll have open houses. They'll have like public engagement opportunities to identify that. What I know about St. George City is they do love making sure that they have accessibility for all modes of transportation. Especially, there's another project too on 700 South University Drive, where they're literally separating it from the roadway, creating a curbed, separated path for cyclists and pedestrians. That's a project that's going to be coming into construction soon.
That's super exciting. And that's a good point too, like when good things happen, we should write in about those too. That's expressing thanks.
Yeah.
I want to see more. Yeah, that's cool thinking.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, and this kind of dovetails on your comment, Sarah, is that we have been talking mostly about separated trails, right?
Yeah.
And it seems to me, as Sarah just pointed out, that once a city is built, it's built. It becomes a harder and more problematic thing to to put in those factors that make cities more livable, for sure. And I'm wondering if, I think you just mentioned a little of that as the answer, is that when improvements happen, but can you maybe talk a little bit about some of the challenges with built environments to bring back that livability?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I guess a lot of that gets talked about more often when general plans get updated. Mainly, yeah, like you said, when the environment is already built upon and already put into place, it's harder to get those projects included in the infrastructure. I couldn't necessarily say what the best way to go about actually redesigning certain areas, but when those general plans get updated, it's definitely like another conversation that needs to be had if there's accessibility shortages in certain areas. So I know a lot of the area around here, like I said earlier, is related to topography. A lot of those concerns are made, and I know a lot of the infrastructure that gets built around here is trying to accommodate for more than just what's available and what's being addressed to meet those shortcomings. But a lot of those conversations are still being had on how to effectively implement. But a lot of the conversation keeps getting driven more to, I guess, a car-centric approach, which in a lot of ways can, in a region like ours specifically, can be really hard to continue to figure out what's the best option. So it does create kind of an issue of how to perfectly address it. So there's no one way to actually do it. I hope that answered in some way.
Yeah, it does. I mean, as an example, I've lived here 2 weeks, and I tried to bike to work last night.
Okay.
And it was impossible. I took the river corridor, the Virgin trail system.
Yeah.
And then I hit Mall Drive, and that was it. Chase some traffic. And oh, okay, good. She knows. But it doesn't. That was my question last night that I kept thinking is that what do you do? I mean, we can spend a lot of energy. It should be spending that energy developing these developments and making them livable, paying attention to open spaces. But the places the highly congested areas, we have to do something too, right?
Right, absolutely. A lot of planned developments like that get put into place, like you're saying, are recognized on a lot of the general plans that are in each individual city, and developers will actually come in, and they'll in order to kind of work with the local cities, they will come in and they'll say, we'll build this section of road, or we'll build this trail in this area. That way you can actually get some better connectivity. So those conversations also happen that help develop the infrastructure to better create a sustainable environment as well. I know Desert Color is one of those areas that, Desert Color is really one of those areas that got built up. I think they started in 2019, 2020, and they've built an entire trail system in and around the entire communities for people for active members of the community to get around. My daughter goes to school out there, and it's perfect, honestly. We're trying to move out there as fast as we can. But yeah, something like that happens and gets brought in a lot.
Last question on that.
Yeah.
When that infill, those urban infills happen, those meetings to discuss, how do we know about it and make sure that we show up?
You're talking about when those developments are coming in? That's a great question. Aside from going to your local planning commission meetings, I'm not sure when those conversations get put in. I'm sure that's another easy answer, but I know we recently did or contributed to a household travel survey that went statewide that identified key areas or regional voices to say how we wanted to build in the near future. And I know down here we wanted to build this way, but we also wanted to have more of a conversation beforehand too. So we had those conversations with local public, and we got a lot of great information out of it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where's the best place to find a map that would show like road ownership for like people who have ideas about suggestions for bicycle infrastructure and finding out who to reach out to? Is that like on the MPO website? Or?
We definitely have that information at the MPO. I would go.
I know the
Washington
St. George
County
City
map.
has.
St. George City,
they've got-
individual cities will have that information available, but I don't know of a one unifying source off the top of my
If
head.
you go to the Washington County map, it has the ownership of all the different parcels in the whole.
Yeah, they'll have the,
The county assessor's office also.
road parcels will usually be one long thing that kind of identifies who's owning that road and who's able to build there. No.
And I'd like to piggyback off of that, because one of the things I wrote down here also is if there was a map, and this might be a big ask, and from your study that shows where the bike lanes actually are on different roads. And I'd be interested in that. And then if we had suggestions about where we would like to have bike lanes put in, is that again to the city council, or does that go to the MPO, or who do we send that request to? Or, for example, if we don't know, and I say this potentially not, I might know, but someone else might not, where a road is owned.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just looks to me like my neighborhood road, and my kid's trying to cross the street and get to school, and there's no crosswalk, right?
Yeah.
So these kinds of suggestions, a bike lane or a crosswalk or a stop sign, who do we find out? How do we find out, and who do we send it to?
So
I know there was a lot of.
yeah, I'm trying to find a good way to get into
Yeah.
that. The first part of your question was, sorry, repeat.
Okay, so if I have a suggestion, and the first part was, is there a map that shows where the bike lanes are from your study?
Right here, okay.
Okay.
So that's what I can show up here on the screen. So this map is literally showing two things. It's showing everything in blue is the on-street facilities, on-street bikeways that were taken into consideration that had data available. And then even to be considered a bike lane for this study, we identified shoulder widths of 4 feet or more. So it's not all actual like designated bike facilities, but it's designated as being able to safely, or as safe as possible, like ride a bike on that roadway. And then everything in red is our separated paved trails that we have data for. So this map constantly gets updated. We're in an update cycle right now of making sure that it's the existing conditions are met and needed. So that's you can go on the story map that on our website, and you can look at that. The next question that you had, or next part of that
Yes.
question was,
Yes.
sorry.
So if we don't know how to find out, or if we don't know who owns the road, so if we want to make a suggestion about a stop sign or a crosswalk, or request a bike lane be designated with the little symbol,
Mhm.
who do we contact, and how do we find them to contact?
Okay, so with existing conditions and trying to improve upon those conditions, I would go to, for City of St. George, I would go to Lloyd Sutton. He's great.
He's with the city?
He's
or
with the city.
county?
He's the active
Okay.
transportation coordinator for St. George City. And then I want to Paul Walker. He's a similar staff member for Washington City. And then there's a few others for all the local cities. So I would find the person designated to active transportation or biking on staff in the public works departments for each individual city, and try to reach out to them and see if there are plans to improve upon some of the systems that are already existing and what those improvements might look like. Because you might see some facilities on the road that are just regular bike lanes, and you would like them to be marked a little more. Maybe they have some improvements saying that include better painting or more signage for wayfinding. Or sometimes you get super lucky and there's a trail gap that's getting filled in that area. So those people are the best to kind of talk to about that, and their contacts are usually put on the websites. And they also attend those meetings at the MPO, like I said. So they're always making sure they're out and about at meetings like that to see what's coming down.
Are there any more burning questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounded like MPO does some funding of
So
trails, or does build trail?
Yeah, it's been more of a it's been more relevant in the past few years than it has been in times past. Specifically because there are more funding opportunities that come through either the federal government or the state to put towards new facilities. So with that comes, one of the ones that come to mind through the MPO is the Active Transportation Investment Funds, where it's designated specifically for bike lanes or separated or trails and that kind of thing. So that money gets funneled throughout the entire state. We get pieces of it to kind of help see projects come to fruition, and then that list of projects that we have for those available funds gets updated on a annual to quarterly basis, or like a not quarterly, 4-year basis, an annual to a 4-year basis. Amendments happen all the time, but yeah.
And how's that funding going?
Sorry.
Do you expect the funding to continue?
The funding does continue. So the funding comes from a couple different sources. It comes from, like I said, the federal government, from state legislative funds that get reappropriated, and it comes from local funding sources as well. So it comes from a multitude of different things. The funding is not always, the total amount of funding for every area in the state is not always promised. It constantly gets updated, but as far as I'm aware, it's constantly growing. And in an area like ours that is, and all of Utah is growing, but in an area like Washington County that is growing so fast, so quick, and our infrastructure is trying to keep up, funding is constantly being funneled down southern Utah. So projects come up faster than we have resources to maintain. So it doesn't always, the funding doesn't always get to see an entire project gets built. It's usually put in to fund like a portion of that project, and then the same, and then there's match funds incorporated into that as well.
Amazing, so many good questions. Right?
Yeah, and if you have any more questions, I'm sticking around to the end to see you.
So many.